Now, NBC4 investigates.
It was a law designed to protect the rights of crime victims, which Ohio voters overwhelmingly approved 6 years ago.
But an abrupt change to Marsys Law allowed law enforcement agencies across Ohio to shield the names of officers involved in shootings, something that until July was considered a public record.
NBC4 Investigates Jamie Ostroff looked into that, how that change happened, and whether this is what Marsys Law was meant to do. Jamie?
Well, when a law enforcement officer uses deadly force, it is often a split-second decision, and it has lasting effects on that officer and the family of the person they killed, regardless of the circumstances leading up. Officer-involved shootings typically trigger investigations by BCI or grand juries who determine whether that officer was justified. Now, while the details of those investigations are kept confidential until they're resolved, until recently, we at least knew who was being investigated. Not anymore. As the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation probes the deadly shooting of 21-year-old Takaya Young by a Blendon Township police officer, Blendon Township is withholding the name of that officer, blurring his face in videos of the confrontation while leaving Young's face exposed. The attorney representing Young's family learned the name of the officer who shot her through his own investigation.
Is contrary to the public interest, is contrary to public safety.
Recent changes in Ohio law regarding the rights of victims to have personally identifying information protected, as well as statutory redactions of certain items that must be blurred, make the release of this kind of video complicated.
Chief John Belford says the victims in this case are the two officers who approached Young under the suspicion she stole liquor from Kroger. A written statement from Belford explains that the officer who shot Young was the victim of attempted vehicular assault because he was struck by her vehicle as she tried to drive away. The statement says the other officer, who was speaking to Young from the driver's side of the car, is a victim of misdemeanor assault because his hand and part of his arm was still in the driver's side window. Neither officer was injured, but their identities were protected by the rights automatically provided to them by Marsys Law, a constitutional amendment passed by 83% of Ohio voters in 2017 to protect the rights of crime victims.
Before Marsys Law, especially before the constitutional amendment, it was very much a patchwork in Ohio. And in this jurisdiction, I could be a victim of crime and I could try to go to court and I could find that the courthouse doors were locked. I have literally been locked out of court. So what Marsys Law has done at its core is it's provided concrete enforceable rights.
Elizabeth Well is the legal director for the Ohio Crime Victim Justice Center. She helped draft House Bill 343, which laid out the framework to enact Marsys Law. After 5 years of working on the bill with prosecutors, public defenders, and other criminal justice experts, Marsys Law went into effect in April of this year.
I think that this bill is probably one of the most democratic bills that I have ever heard of.
But in the weeks that followed, law enforcement agencies, particularly large ones, started to encounter some issues as they were required to inform victims of all crimes, big and small, about their rights.
The sheer number of paperwork for every single victim.
Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein's office brought the issue to lawmakers.
It was tying up officers to actually help and assist further victims down the road.
The reason we are bringing this bill for a potential emergency clause, the amendment to the bill right now, is because of law enforcement bringing an urgent situation to us.
Representative Andrea White, who sponsored House Bill 343, proposed an emergency change to Marsys Law in June. It allowed victims of more serious crimes to automatically receive their rights without officers filling out paperwork to opt the victims in.
The way that Marsys Law is currently written, it says any victim without one single exception.
That includes officers.
The public doesn't know who's involved in these uses of force. And I think that creates a level of suspicion and tension because of the lack of transparency. So the city is left in a position to, either provide the transparency and violate the law, or follow the law and create a lack of transparency.
On July 9th, about a week and a half after the new version of Marsys Law kicked in, Columbus police officers were involved in a shootout on Interstate 70 that left a suspect dead and an officer injured.
We met with Representative White and other reps when this was being written and warned her and her staff of this scenario, wrote Columbus Police Attorney Jeff Furby to BCI's lawyer in a series of emails about how to handle releasing the names of the officers involved. We warned her that the public/media would very likely react negatively to this, quote, lack of transparency. So here we are. The attorneys agreed. Marsys Law prohibited them from releasing the officers' names. I asked Well why Marsys Law does not contain language about officers' rights.
The nightmare that would create was not something that we wanted to invite.
So it had to be broad, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yeah, absolutely. If not, it would lead to a lot of constitutional violations.
Still, Marsys Law does not change the investigative process that follows a use of force.
We need to have investigations of these incidents, and if someone is charged with a crime, they cannot use that victim designation anymore. If charges are brought against the officer who shot the woman in Blendon Township, that person will be a defendant, that person will not be a victim, and their name will be released.
Again, BCI is still investigating that shooting in Blendon Township. Now, both Klein and Well agree that Ohioans are better off with Marsys Law in place. I also spoke with Ohio's top law enforcement officer about his thoughts on this policy. Attorney General Dave Yost has been a vocal advocate of transparency in public records since he took office in 2019. You'll hear what he has to say tonight at 6.